Well, good morning, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're going to be discussing how a leasing strategy can help you with moving your project forward, whether you're adding new or upgrading your equipment, upgrading or purchasing a new ERP system. A leasing solution can offer you a very creative way to fund your project and help you to meet your economic and operational goals. Our presenter today is going to be Warren Smith. Warren has been with Godlan and previously with Infor for 9 years, with over 25 years of senior leadership in the automotive industry. His background includes thought leadership as well as general manufacturing. Warren has published a number of articles and papers which offer deep insight into manufacturing operations, innovation and the use of technology which organizations can adopt to better run their business. With a business background including one of the largest Tier 1 suppliers in the world, Warren is well-versed in looking at business requirements and working with organizations toward developing and executing their business strategy. As we go through today's presentation, we would invite you to send your questions related to the topic. You can do that by sending those through our GoToMeeting chat panel, and we will read those off as we have some question and answer time right after the presentation. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to you, Warren.
Thank you, Joe, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this fast-moving topic here. And I will be joined today by Tim White, and Tim hails from Atlanta, Georgia. He is a leasing expert in the software leasing. So we'll be working with him, and he'll be answering a number of questions as we go through and presenting today, specifically around the software portion of leasing, which has some nuances and has some very different aspects of it as compared to, for example, hardware leasing. So with our agenda today, what we're going to do is, first of all, take a look at some of the business reasons to consider leasing. We'll be taking a look at some of the reasons to consider leasing of your hardware. And then we're going to turn it over to Tim to cover the software leasing. And we'll wrap it up with, for example, how to get started in the areas or for topics that you'll need to do to prepare yourself for taking advantage of this alternative financing method that can really help you bring the business requirements to you. A study that was done not too long ago by both IBM and IDC found that really the issue with funding of projects, and for example, projects that are dynamic, that come up during the business year, for example, maybe it's a new customer, maybe it's building a new plant, something that maybe wasn't necessarily being able to be budgeted in a traditional capital budget, and using that crystal ball, Ouija board, or whatever you forecast from an IT perspective is. But what we found was that as business became much more dynamic, that they needed to be able to react much more quickly, and the ability to have funding sources so that you're not tied just to a budget. And for example, a capital budget, you get to, let's say, June or July, major business change comes along, and you don't want to go back as a CIO to your constituents or your customers, i.e. the manufacturing folks, the sales folks, and say, gee, I didn't budget for this this new capability in IT. You're just going to have to live with that. That's typically not an acceptable answer to your customers, because what they're going to do is they're going to go find a way to do it. And what you're going to do is, as a CIO, you may find yourself losing control because you're not being creative. So the ability to really look at alternative financing methods and being able to look at leasing to meet the dynamics of business change are extremely important. So now let's take a look at, what are typical capital expenses that you're going to look at. And from a hardware standpoint, it might be CPUs, the servers, the drives, basically all the hardware that you're going to be placing your software on. You'll also take a look at your infrastructure. It might be the actual computer room. It might be the HVAC systems. It might be security and backup software. It might be network infrastructure such as the routers, the cables, and switches and such. The other side of this is the software, which, again, being very different than a traditional capital expense of servers and infrastructure and network, software has its own nuances. And that might be the software such as the operating system. It might be a software such as the database. Or what we'll cover which is near and dear to our heart today, is the ERP system. Really that business software that's going to bring change to the business. So one of the things as a CIO or anyone that's involved in IT you must really understand your business goals. And I mentioned your customers, and I use that term. That's an old term that I used to use as a former CIO. I considered my customers, my manufacturing, my plant managers, my manufacturing folks, my production people, my sales and sales team. Those were all my customers because I was delivering services to them. And really, what I had to do first is really get involved in the business. I had to understand the business. Unfortunately, in my time as a CIO, I did have a reporting structure directly to our division president and sat on the operating committee. So really had a good understanding of what was involved in the business and really keeping my hand on what was required. And I was able to have a very good relationship with the CFO and CEO, and really was able to make sure that I got in their ear and was able to talk their language and make it relevant to what they had to say or what they needed. I was able to understand the company finances. In my case, it was a public company, and so there were certain requirements as far as, for example, how to mitigate tax liabilities on leases, being able to take a look at what we could fund from capital, what we couldn't fund for capital. And it was a very structured environment. We had a lot of reporting issues. Now, if you're in the private industry, for example, where it's an individual owner or perhaps an LLC or such a group of partners, very different company finances that might occur. So you really have to understand that as well. You're also going to have to understand what are the business trends in your industry, because what you're going to be doing is providing services that hopefully are going to move your business ahead of the competition. But you want to necessarily keep your IT costs and spend within the realm of the industry. You know, if you're in the hospital and medical device field, there might be more spend on the IT infrastructure because of serialization, lot control, and federal requirements versus, let's say, being in a traditional manufacturing or a less regulated field. So you're really going to want to make sure that your IT spend and processes fit the industry. You're going to want to know your competition because that's who you're competing against. You also want to stay on top of the technology so that you're taking a look at acquiring the assets, and whether that be software or hardware, being able to acquire technology that's going to live through its depreciation cycle or through the lease cycle. And then ultimately here, which is what we're going to help you with today, is understanding the financing and how to acquire the assets in the best manner possible. You know, various options and alternatives for funding of those capital projects, such as leasing. And one of the things I have found from personal experience here is, if you're a CEO, you're a CFO, you want to have the complete plan. You don't want an IT person coming to you with a partial plan any more than you'd want a manufacturing person coming through and only taking a look at a portion of the manufacturing business when they want to do, for example, a new asset or new plant or equipment. So you really have to make sure this is very complete and ties directly to that business case. And when I say complete, it might be the software cost, the maintenance of the software, implementation, additional labor that might be required, and don't forget the training and retraining as an ongoing expense, because you want to make sure that you protect and preserve these assets. So training is extremely important to make sure it's kept up. You also want to make sure that you're speaking of this, I mentioned this before, as the financial language. So you're going to be really wanting to make sure that any presentation that you do to a CFO is going to be speaking the language of the CFO, making sure that you've got accurate returns, making sure that you've got all the financial numbers broken down. Again, this is something that we can help you with as well. And, of course, it must be aligned to the business goals and making sure that it fits the strategy of the business as you go forward. Now, leasing is not something that is new to the industry. It's been around for quite some time. Matter of fact, in 2012, you can see $60 billion of IT equipment was leased. That's a huge number. And really that is taking a look at what is really going on in the industry here, that when it comes down to technology, people want to make sure that they're staying refreshed. And leasing is a great way to do that. And they don't want to get caught with a bunch of assets that are antiquated. And when we talk about antiquated assets, hardware is probably one of the first things that starts to age. And take a look at, you don't want to have servers that are sitting around for more than really 3 years. There starts to becoming a maintenance issue. There's also a lot of energy issues and ongoing costs for operating those machines from, again, the energy use, the heating and cooling costs. There's a lot of changes that have been going on. And you want to make sure your hardware is up to date. So that's kind of the basic fundamental things we take a look at here. Things like servers and drives, keep those up to date 36 months. Take a look at some of your desktop infrastructure and such 48 months. And then some of the building more physical assets like your UPSs and HVAC, 5 years and such. We really want to take a look at some of those. Now, we start taking a look at software, and this is where we start seeing some of the differences here. That software is typically a much longer investment, especially in the ERP software. You take a look at desktop software, you can take a look at your Excel, your Word. Microsoft's they make a lot of changes. You want to make sure you stay up with those. So maybe 3 to 4 years, but you may not carry any maintenance on that. But when it comes to ERP software, the databases that are underlying the ERP software, and you're going to want to keep that for 10 years or more. And here at Godlan, what we have found is we have customers that have been running the SyteLine software, for example, for over 20 years. And they keep it on maintenance. They stay up to date because it has become part of their operating fabric. They went through the implementation. They have really understand how it works. They have built those processes in lockstep with their business and are benefiting from keeping that software for a long period of time. So this is one of the changes that we see between hardware and software, is the fact is the ERP software stays around for a very long time. And just to recap on some of that, we start seeing a hardware that ages poorly, energy improvements, typically 15 to 20% per year on efficiency, desktop software a little bit longer, and then we find that the ERP ages extremely well. If you take a look at, for example, an implementation, perhaps 6 months, 4 to 6 months, you really start to hit your prime, maybe close to the 12-month period, and then really you're going to be growing and really hitting on all cylinders as you continue forward with that ERP software. So you don't want to be changing ERP software willy-nilly. And that also goes to the fact that if you are taking a look at new ERP softwares, make sure that your ERP vendor has a good fit with you. They understand your business. So we can now take a look at that. One of the things I wanted to mention here, and as we start to wrap up on some of the hardware issues here, is hardware disposals actually become quite an issue now. That what do you do with the old hardware? And again, if you're taking a look at a leasing function, that can be taken care of for you. Well, if you're not leasing it, what you can find is that your hardware disposal can be actually quite a costly disposal process. And matter of fact, when I was going back to my days of a CIO, we had a very formalized process to make sure that the data was removed from the disk drives. I think this confidentiality was taken care of, and also because we were a very public and visible company, we had to make sure that assets such as, let's say, monitors were disposed of properly, so there was not an environmental impact, because we had our ISO 14,000 certificates, and that computer disposal was actually part of that environmental ISO standard that we followed. So you want to make sure that hardware is disposed of. So now we're going to move into, and I'm going to introduce, let Tim do a little bit of the talking here shortly, in just a moment, but we're going to start taking a look at software leasing. Software leasing is a specialized industry. There's experts in this field, of which Tim and Encore tend to fall into, and they're specialized in that, and they take care of those issues, because really what you're looking at, instead of a physical asset like a CPU that could be leased and actually has value, software itself, because of licensing and such like that, has different implications, for this. So we'll start taking a look at, what are the reasons why you would buy versus lease, and being able to take a look at, in the case of buying, you're going to have the one-time capital expense, the one-time outlay of software, and that may consume other resources that takes away from your manufacturing ability. So if you want to take a look at leasing, create that out of your ongoing operating expense, a nice monthly number that you roll through, and Tim will get into that. So, Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you because, if I was to say, what to look for in a leasing company, you're the guy that's going to have the answers. So, Tim?
All right. Hey, thank you, Warren. Well, I'll just take a few minutes or so to provide kind of an overview of the software leasing marketplace and some of the benefits a firm can realize by considering a lease for their software-driven acquisitions. And I'll start by saying that even today, software leasing is still relatively new concept for many companies. Many firms today are simply really unaware that you can even finance software. I think this is primarily due to I think Warren mentioned the software's lack of any collateral value. When most individuals think of leasing or financing, the assumption has always been that there must be some form of underlying collateral to stand behind the loan or the lease. You can think of leasing a car, for example, or financing a new home, leasing technology, or any other equipment that has some inherent value. And yet, even with that, today, we're doing basically over $2 billion in software financing each year. And that does not even include the services that go towards implementing that software. Historically, however, software was simply purchased outright with cash, with only the hardware content being leased. And that was true probably for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I just mentioned, hardware holds all the collateral value and has always been acceptable to lenders and leasing companies. If there was a default situation, the lender could simply go repossess the equipment and hope to resell it to recoup their losses. Number two, at that time, software represented only just a small fraction of a total acquisition cost for your IT. It was the hardware that always represented the lion's share of the purchase, and that's really what has changed so dramatically in today's marketplace and kind of driven how financing companies look at software. Because now it's the software that represents this lion's share of the purchase, with its value almost always exceeding the cost of the hardware. In fact, it's been my experience that the software and services represent over 75% of the total cost of a new solution, which is a big change, a remarkable change, considering that hardware used to be the driving force behind an IT purchase. And over the years, you hear it all the time. Back in the day, IT managers will always tell you that you really can't get fired for buying IBM gear. Today, however, it's the software that drives the decision making. It's the software that provides the remarkable enterprise solutions that are now available for helping your business run faster, smarter, more productively. And this rise in the promise of software has encouraged companies to treat software as any other financial commodity and simply lease it, just like they've always done with computer hardware, yellow equipment, or any other type of large capital item. As a result, some leasing companies began to change their thinking, including Encore, with respect to the lease financing of items with little or no collateral value. Maybe if the investment is important to borrow, the user, it could also be viewed as a good and safe investment for the lender as well. And that's exactly what's happened with leasing companies. They've really stepped up to meet the increasing demand for the lease financing of software as the value of software pricing has gone up. With that brief background, we can kind of look at some of the benefits associated with this new software leasing marketplace. I think the main reason, the main benefit for selecting a lease option is really to simply conserve cash, which provides an organization with increased flexibility. Leasing avoids using the organization's capital to support its technology infrastructure requirements. Instead, it allows you to use your capital resources to invest in other business growth ideas or new opportunities. Leasing rather than purchasing can free up capital to meet these requirements without preventing IT from meeting their ever-changing business requirements. Leasing does not change your company's available capital since no capital is being used. This can give a company a more attractive financial rating and allows for the possibility of qualifying for other business loans without considering the impact of the software or technology purchase. Leasing provides flexibility in timing technology purchases, enabling you to buy new software and technology when needed, rather than waiting for resources or budgeting to become available. It also allows you to move up the technology curve when the need and business opportunities require upgrades or software enhancements. Leasing provides for predictable fixed payments over terms ranging from typically from 24 to 60 months, which is a great option to match your cash outlay with the benefits your new system will provide. Conserving your bank line availability is another benefit. If you can get similar or better rates without disturbing your existing credit lines or borrowing capacity, why wouldn't you? Besides conserving capital, leasing provides unmatched technological flexibility by allowing you to upgrade to the latest technology, even if it's in the middle of your lease term. We can do this with adding little or no increase to your monthly payments. This allows your company to always stay ahead of the curve in this age of rapid technological change. Software leasing allows you to obtain all the software licenses you may need today and still remain within your annual budget constraints. We hear it all the time where a software is being sold, but maybe the company, the user, doesn't have it in their budget, so they have to really slim down the amount of user licenses or concurrent user licenses they can buy. With leasing, you can get all those now and still wrap it up in one fixed monthly payment. Tax benefits. You have depreciation for software leases, not unlike a purchase. You also can take advantage of the Section 179 deductions, which basically provides for an accelerated depreciation into the current year. Leasing can provide you with creative payment term options. We do, from time to time, step leases, which allow your payments to start low and ramp up as the software is being implemented. It's a good way to match the cash flow, or if you have seasonality requirements, it's a good choice. We can also do deferred billing options that require really no payment up front, or for some initial period, maybe 6 months. Sometimes we've done as long as a year, which even allows even more flexibility with your cash outlay to match the solution benefits. Kind of to summarize, you're essentially using our money to pay for your technology and holding on your own capital to support all the other important business expenses and core investments. You're turning large upfront cash outlays into affordable monthly payments that you should be able to comfortably budget for and handle. I'm sure there's more, but let me get briefly into what can be included in a software lease besides the software. Besides the software, maintenance agreements can be included. The first year is almost always incorporated because it's typically a annual upfront cost, but future maintenance can also be included, whether it's paid in advance. If we did a 5-year lease, we can pay 5 years of maintenance up front, so you can budget that, or we can add it each year as it comes due. And this is just kind of another one of the benefits leasing provides, the flexibility to add items, whether it be more software, whether it be maintenance, whether it be any other item, into the lease midterm. And these new items can be added on a coterminous basis with an existing schedule that we've done, or it can be done over its own new term. Professional services are typically included as well, and for good reason. Services can include the implementation costs, the training costs, consulting costs, conversion costs, you name it, it all can be included. In fact, it's not unusual for the services cost to be equal to or more than the cost of the software these days. And this is something that you should keep in mind when you do look for a leasing firm. Can they provide financing for the complete project without prohibitive ratio requirements? For instance, many firms may limit the amount of services that they'll include in a lease as a percentage of the software, or even as a percentage of the hardware value. Just something to keep in mind when you are evaluating leasing companies. Lastly, of course, all hardware items associated with a project can be included.
And Tim, a couple of questions here that I was just thinking about here. Because of the collateral issue, are the rates different for hardware and software?
With Encore, they're not. I can't really speak to I know there are some certain lenders. I know IBM will have separate rates for software, and they're always higher for software. They'll have higher rates for services. Encore is a little bit different, and companies like us are a little bit different. That we're not really a collateral lender. Our focus has really always been on financing to a company's credit worthiness. So we will not put a premium on a transaction just because there's no collateral value. A lot of deals we do don't have any hardware, and so we simply really just look at the company's ability to pay, how we view their credit, and that's how we set the rate without thought of what we're financing.
Excellent. So if I was a CIO coming to you, what would be some of the documents that I would need ahead of time so that I'm properly prepared, to talk with you or talk with Encore, so we can get the thing moving here?
Well, there's probably a couple of issues with that. There's number one, the documentation. I mean, all leases typically incorporate, and we certainly do, a master lease agreement. And along that, we have schedules that attach to that master lease agreement, which kind of provide the terms for any given transaction, what we're financing for that transaction, what the payment is. From a credit perspective, we have a couple programs. Encore can finance transactions up to $150,000 with only a credit application, which is just a one-page document. Approvals for that program typically are done within the same day. I could say 24 to 48 hours, but normally it's done within 24 hours, which is a really neat program if you have a privately held company that just typically does not share credit information. For deals over $150,000 or for any transaction looking for the best rates, they can give us typical requirements would be 2 years of financial statements and whatever you might have, the company might have on an interim basis, interim P&L and balance sheet. And so that's what we use in not only factoring with the rate we're going to use, but also to request credit approval for.
Excellent. So it sounds pretty straightforward to get moving with this. And excellent. That's good to hear, because that's typically you want to make sure that you can nail the financing and get that taken care of as quickly as possible. Super. So, and you mentioned the 36 and 48 months. I take it those are typically numbers that you would work into there. I'm assuming that
24 to 60 months. 24 to 60 months is our typical terms. 36 months is by far the most typical term, because it's a great balance between rates. And the fact that there's no collateral involved. A lot of times we're more comfortable on a 3-year deal than a 5-year deal. Maybe they're interested in what rates are these days for most transactions. I mean, it's a great time to lease. Rates are incredible. Most deals that we do are in the 3.5% to 4.5% range, which are very good, especially if you're looking at software which doesn't have any tangible value. And those rates are fixed. And eventually, I keep saying it, rates are going to go up. So it's definitely a great time with a leasing company. Rates are fixed. There's no fluctuation with that during the term of the lease whatsoever.
Yeah, and because now I can build that ongoing operating expense, that monthly expense, I can tie that directly to my business benefits. So as an IT director, I can go to my customer and say, okay, we're going to implement this new software solution. It's going to gain us this much revenue or this much cost savings, and this is my expenditures on a monthly basis out. So it ties really very, very nicely to the operating goals and those corporate goals and objectives. And really, the nice part about this is it's no surprises. You know what's going to be in the package, and you know what's going to be over the next let's say 36 months. So excellent there.
That's right.
So Yeah. So really, what I kind of look at this as a little bit of a wrap up here. We start taking the next steps here, and one of the things that I kind of recommend as a former CIO here is to really keep a look at my present inventory of my software. And I say inventory of my software. What are its features and functions? What are its capabilities? Because I want to be able to use as much as I can of my existing environment, but I also want to know what I have to do. What's my gap analysis to what my business is going to require going forward? We'll take a look at gathering those operating costs, making sure that they are all inclusive, which software, maintenance, all those pieces that we might be taking a look at leasing. Plus, if I'm, let's say, doing the hosting environment where I might not be making hardware, I want to get my hosting costs as well. I want to go ahead and take a look at taking a look at my suppliers and my leasers, and find out get the best folks that can put this together as a complete solution. I probably at that point have to go to my board and CEO, CFO approval, present my business case, have the numbers all ticked and tacked together, put all my documentation together at that point for someone, Tim, like yourself, to make sure that you've got everything you need.
Right.
Get the software and hardware ordered and start the lease at that point. So really wrap it all up there in a very tight process. So really, just to recap here, taking a look at some of the financial benefits of leasing, really reacting and meeting those dynamics of business, being able to meet the needs of your clients and your customers at that point. Conserving capital so that the capital is available for, let's say, for manufacturing assets or things that might not be able to be leased. So it's nice that software and is able to fall into this environment. Being able to manage that consistent budget. You mentioned the lease rates now, definitely a low cost of funds for the software, reducing those disposal issues if you lease the hardware, and really ultimately improve your user and management satisfaction, making sure that as an IT provider to your business that you're doing the right thing and roll forward with that. So with that, really, we wrap this up, and I'm going to turn this back over to Joe here and for our questions and answers.
Hey Tim, just one question here at the end. Hardware typically is a known cost. The purchase of an ERP system or upgrade licensing, adding in maintenance, those are known costs. Services isn't always a completely known cost. It's an estimate. So what do you typically see a customer doing as far as adding in services? If they have a block of hours that's going to be the assistance needed for them, to help with their upgrade or their new ERP implementation, do customers just select a certain number of services days to add in because of the fact that the end number could be larger or smaller than first estimated?
That's a great question, because almost every deal we do, you're right, we're doing the services along with the software, because the software is no good without the services. So typically what we try to do is basically approve a customer for an amount that they think they're going to use. And so we'll try to use the high-end estimate that they think the services are going to be. And that's what we'll base their approval on. And every month, and what we do is, and this is also kind of important to make sure if you are evaluating leasing companies that they can do this, is that we will approve you for an all-in number. If you don't use it all, you're not penalized, because we're only billing you based on what we paid out to the vendor the previous month. So you can kind of view it like a construction loan. So your payments are going to kind of automatically be ramped up as the software is being implemented. And we'll pay whatever your terms call for, whether the blocks are prepaid, whether it's simply time and material. We'll basically meet the payment obligations that your agreement calls for, and that you and the customer have agreed to. So it's a neat tool. If we go over, we'll simply just increase the approval, or we can cut off the lease and we can start a new schedule for the balance that's owed. So we can handle that in a variety of different ways. But it's we understand software finance, and we understand that the services are never fixed typically, and so we're certainly prepared to either increase the approval and make adjustments as needed.
Excellent.
That's a good point of making sure that you work with a vendor that the software comes in on budget and on time. It's a very helpful thing too. So. Joe,
yeah.
You have a question?
That was it. So thank you, Warren. Thank you, Tim, so much. Great presentation, great information to share with the attendees. For those of you that joined us and spent time with us today, we really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day. If you have further questions for us, you can send them to us. If they pop up, send them to info@Godlan, info@Godlan.